Hello, social workers, mental health professionals, and change agents. Welcome to another episode of season 5 of the Social Work Rants podcast. I'm your host, Bass Moreno. Saludos a todos. Greetings, everybody. Thank you for tuning in, tapping in, wherever you're watching or listening to the podcast. Thank you, everybody, for your love, for your support. Gracias a todos por su apoyo, for rocking with me and listening to the podcast. You can follow the podcast at the Social Work Rants Podcast. That is all one word on Instagram. Follow the podcast on Twitter while it's still free. At Social Work Rants, you follow the podcast on Facebook, aka Meta. Type in the Social Work Rants Podcast. Hit that like button. And of course, on YouTube, the red subscribe button. Hit that subscribe button. Leave a comment, rate the podcast. The podcast can also be heard on all audio platforms, Apple, Spotify. Rate the podcast and let me know what you think. Also, this podcast is brought to you by Bass City Entertainment, your home for holistic self-care for social workers, mental health professionals using poetry and Zumba, featuring my book, Trying Through Pain, How to Maximize Your Full Potential During Hard Times. 30 pages, front and back, short poems written during the pandemic of 2020, at least the heart of the pandemic. And also, for those that don't know or haven't listened for a while, I'm also the contributing author of Latinx and Social Work Volume 2 is already a bestseller. So tune in, tap in, get your copies of both books. They're both available on Amazon for purchase. I'll put the links in the show notes. My guest at this time is the executive director of the NASW in Delaware and also New Jersey. So one of my questions is definitely going to be like, how do you do that? uh, Jennifer Thompson, pleasure to finally connect with you.
Yes, thank you so much. I'm excited to be here and chat all things social work.
Yeah, absolutely. They, so people have been listening to the podcast. People know at least quite a few people know that I talked about my journey of moving to Delaware during the pandemic, and I give a little glimpse and pieces of how things social work is done in Delaware, and it's definitely a lot different from my time in New York, and from talking to other social workers is definitely different. You can even be licensed as with just a bachelor's here in Delaware, which I'm still learning how that even works. But just different things. We got our urban areas, we got our suburban areas, and definitely our rural areas with a lot of farmland, especially down south. So it's an interesting place to do social work, to say the least.
Absolutely. Delaware is one of the most diverse states that we can practice in. We've got, as you mentioned, a little mix of everything here. And I think that's what makes our community in Delaware as social workers so incredible, but also just the landscape of the work that we do in Delaware so incredibly difficult as well, right? Because you're speaking to a lot of different populations on a daily basis. And our Delaware social workers have got to be incredibly nimble and apt to respond to a lot of different communities in a lot of different ways.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess we could start off with my first question is, and also not to neglect New Jersey, and New Jersey is definitely diverse as well. I lived at Bergen County for 8 years, and then moving to Newark for a year, and it's definitely to get services is definitely easier to get services, I guess, in Essex County than it is in Bergen County, at least at the time that I lived at. So it's definitely diverse, and they got their farmland too in their rural areas and urban areas. So kind of similar to Delaware as well, just in the bigger landscape.
Yep, absolutely.
So how do you manage?
Similar.
How do you manage to be executive director of 2 states?
That's a great question. And I think it's sort of the challenge of all social workers, right? Mine's just a different setting. But I spend a lot of time on the road out in the community talking to social workers. And I think one of the beautiful things about being in Delaware and also in New Jersey is that we have a lot of crossover between the two states. Delawareans are also in some of the universities in New Jersey and New Jersey, Delaware, or New Jersey social workers retire in Delaware. And there's a lot of intermingling between the two states, and that makes it a little bit easier to manage. But I spend a lot of time on the road and speaking with social workers all over both states. And it's a lot of fun. And I think being able to manage one of the largest chapters of NASW, which is New Jersey. New Jersey is the second largest in the country, and Delaware is one of the smaller chapters of NASW in the country, has really brought about this incredibly rich understanding of what social work communities are and do, and their power, and how small chapters can move and manipulate and maneuver in different ways that are really fun. We can get in some good trouble that some of the larger chapters are not able to do because of their systems and structure. But the larger chapters have, different sets of opportunities in their own respect. It's a good place to be. And I am just so grateful every day that I get to be in the role and travel between the two, because across the board, phenomenal people.
How long have you had the title of executive director?
So I've been with New Jersey, oh gosh, going on 4.5 years. It's hard to, time flies when you're having fun.
Right.
I was with the New Jersey chapter for about a little over a year before Delaware asked me to come serve their chapter as well. And not without a lot of thoughtful pause, right? Got to make sure it's the right move for you.
Right, of course.
But it was such an easy, like after thinking about it, it was a really easy sell. The community in Delaware is vibrant, and there are so many new challenges that Delaware social workers are sort of wrestling with. We were just at the cusp of signing into law the multi-tier licensure. We're just starting that process of bringing that law into fruition, walking through the grandfathering process. Like, there were so many cool things happening in the state of Delaware. I knew I couldn't pass that opportunity up.
No, no, absolutely. I know when I first came in when I first moved to Delaware, just over 2 years ago, and working in the school system and being told about the grandfathering program after failing the exam, five different times, and I'm like, what? I gotta like, I didn't care how much the grandfathering program costs. It's like I'd have to take the exam again. Like, where do I sign up? What do I got to do? It's like by any means necessary to get it done, and I got it done. So and I know the licensing renewal is coming up for January. So getting my CEUs together, and we're getting into that with the NASW Delaware with their conference coming up this month on the 18th. I signed up for it, so I'm looking forward to it.
Awesome. Well, yeah, it's quickly approaching. It's hard to believe that. I feel like when you start planning a conference, it's so far out. It feels like it's never going to come, and then right around the corner, it's here, and you're like in the final stages. We're really excited about it. And you bring up something really important that I think Delaware social workers are starting to, or really have had to wrestle with, and the rest of the country is as well now too. But this idea of the licensing exam, and God bless you for taking it so many times. And I have to say, it's not you, it's the test.
Yes.
And it is not you, it is the test. And for any social workers who are listening and have not been able to pass it, it is not you, it is the test. There's something fundamentally wrong with standardized tests in our country. It is historically been problematic, and the social work exam is no stranger to these challenges as well. And just now are we starting to really wrestle what that looks like and what that means. And I'm so proud of the work that Delaware social workers are doing. We, at the release of the ASWB exam, the data a couple of months ago, Delaware social workers really showed up in just droves to our doorsteps. Everyone called and said, we got to do something. We need to talk about this. So we pulled together a listening session, and we heard the stories of the trauma, the multiple failures, the frustration, and not only that from the social work community, but like ultimately the impact on their livelihood, right?
No,
like
absolutely.
the missed promotions, the inability to advance, to set up their own practices, to work with insurance companies, and ultimately then the impact on the communities. We are in a mental health crisis in this country, Delaware especially. And we know that this test is serving as a barrier to getting qualified mental health professionals and social workers in the community, serving on a daily basis, addressing these needs. So Delaware social workers have been unapologetic in the demand that the Delaware Board of Social Work Examiners immediately place a moratorium on using this exam as part of the licensing process. So Delaware and NASW and Delaware has been the first in the country to formally ask their board for this moratorium. And I'm just so proud of the work that we do. We all stand united, and it's such a proud moment for me. I love that we're united in that.
No, that is no, that's good to hear. And I know NASW Illinois were really pushing and doing stuff against the ASWB exams. So
Absolutely.
I'm glad that these state chapters are really doing stuff. And I know throughout the I guess the pandemic, I know like the New York State chapter and the New York City chapters were doing amazing work as well in terms of leading the forefront and just different things regarding the pandemic. And I'm glad NASW Delaware is continuing that work as well.
Yeah, our chapters have done a lot of phenomenal work. As you mentioned, Illinois, was first to work really through their legislative process and eliminate the use of the exam on the lower tiers of licensure, not the clinical. And did that a couple of years ago. Rhode Island followed suit last year before this data was released. And I think you're going to see more and more states sort of wrestle with that decision, and what does that mean for licensing compacts, and what does that mean for the profession as a whole. But I think we're sort of at this pivotal moment as a profession, and I'm always so proud of my colleagues. Their chapters are doing and leading good trouble in their respective spaces.
No, absolutely. Now you mentioned about the mental health crisis here in Delaware, and again, I don't want to neglect New Jersey as well. Like what do you're out and about and talking to people, like what are you seeing? What are the struggles we in the profession are facing within the two states?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I think it's one that's sort of multifaceted. I think we're in a mental health crisis as a nation. There's plenty of documented evidence that really supports that statement, with the global pandemic and the onset of COVID, and just the shift in all of our lives in just ways we had never imagined. That combined with the racial reckoning, and the police violence and the brutality. I mean, our communities are really struggling, and there is a shortage of qualified professionals to address these needs. I hear on a daily basis from practice owners, small and large, and mental health organizations and nonprofit organizations, domestic violence organizations, mental health associations, and HIV/AIDS organizations, truly the people in the front line. And it is not uncommon for them to say, we have wait lists for new clients of up to 3 months, sometimes 9, 12, depending on their area, that they have clients ready to be matched. They're ready to hire. They have candidates, ready to go, but there are systemic challenges. The ASWB exam, our licensing boards, their processing of applications far too slow. New Jersey is notoriously bad. Like, there are real barriers to getting qualified people out into the communities to do the work that they're qualified to do. And we have got to start addressing these systemic issues.
No, absolutely. And it's funny you mentioned that in New Jersey it was notoriously slow. I mean, every time like I paid to take the exam, and luckily, at least at the time, once you pay the registration fee to take the exam, you don't have to pay it again. Is that still the case?
Oh no, you've got to pay it again.
So you got to pay
You've got to pay your fees.
the registration, no, like this
The
at the time. I was
processing.
yeah, the process. I think it was like $75 at the time. So you got to pay that plus the actual exam fee.
Yeah, and then if you fail the exam, you got to pay to take the exam again. I mean, it is a
Right.
money-making entity.
Yeah, I understand you got to
And
pay the exam again, but yeah, it's definitely a money making. One of my professors at Fordham, he had told me that it was a money making exam, and I think that was after like the first or second time I took the exam. So when he told me that, like yeah, I see it.
you know, and it's interesting. I mean, this is an interesting part of the conversation, and particularly in Delaware, and it's a little bit different in other states, but Delaware, as we moved to multi-tiered licensure a couple of years ago, and one of the things that we allowed in that process was individuals who had been practicing in the field of social work, but had no formal education and training in social work to apply for grandfathered licenses. And I have some feelings about that. I think that does us a great disservice, generally speaking, as a profession. But at the last licensing board meeting in Delaware a month ago, what we did here was the board evaluated a candidate coming up for grandfather provision. Um, and this individual was granted a license to practice social work in the state of Delaware. This individual had never been to college. Not only did he not have a degree in social work, he didn't have any formal education whatsoever.
Wow.
And they were able to evaluate his quote unquote competency in different ways outside of this exam. Now, I have a strong opinion about whether anybody without formal education and training in social work should be called a social worker. I would argue probably not the case. And there's some real issues with that. But the board sort of demonstrated for us that you could, in theory, evaluate a social worker's competence through various means, not just an exam, not just a standardized test, because this individual did not take an exam. He had never had a practicum like social workers know. And, there are other ways for us to evaluate competencies and do so outside of standardized testing and in ways that are not, purely revenue generating entities.
Right.
There's got to be a different way.
No, no, of course, no, and I'm glad you brought up the title protection, and I know when I was working at the first school district I worked at, and having that conversation with my supervisor, and my supervisor is not a trained social worker, and myself and my coworker at the time were trying to explain title protection to him, and it's like was just like a extreme foreign concept to him, that he's just going to make a decision of what he feels best for who he wants to hire as a school social worker, who then eventually hired somebody else who wasn't a social worker. But so I'm glad you brought that up. I've had people that I've worked with that doesn't do not have their MSW, and calling themselves social workers. Even they work in the field, they've been in the field doing mental health work for a long period of time, but don't have those basics that you learn with a MSW, or even a BSW. Didn't even have
Right.
a BSW, and doing social work and calling themselves social workers. So, I'm glad you brought that up, because I know it's been a big topic for the last few years within the profession.
Yeah, and it's one that I'm, particularly passionate about. I think we really have to do a better job as a profession, all of us, telling the story of what social workers do and the really specific skills that we bring to a table. And I don't want to discredit our friends and our colleagues in the mental health space that are doing great work, because they are, and they're contributing in very substantial ways. But the truth is, social workers have a very different lens. We're trained differently. We have a code of ethics that we are demanded to operate in a very different way. And I think that's important for us to protect. We bring value to the table. Not everybody should be able to call themselves a social worker. It's not a title, it's a degree
Right.
and a profession.
Yeah, of course, and it needs to be given its respect that is long overdue. This is
Absolutely. And I also see our colleagues in the field who have MSWs or BSWs who went to social school for social work, might not be licensed because they're not doing sort of traditional clinical work. But I was speaking to somebody from actually Delaware organization a couple of weeks ago, and she said, "Oh, I'm a director of development. I used to be a social worker." And I was like, "Stop, hold on a second. Like, you're still a social worker." And I wonder if as a profession we led with, I'm a social worker and the executive director, or I'm a social worker and a school therapist, or I'm a social worker, and we would really encourage more broader understanding of what we do as a profession, the depth and breadth of the work that we do, and also just continue to elevate ourselves. I wonder if that might be helpful.
No, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I know at times, depending on the population, be like, you tell people, a social worker, be like, okay, what does that title even mean? And I find it hard to like really explain to somebody like who's not has never dealt with a social worker or anything like that, and it's kind of like, well, explain like your role, what you do on a daily basis, or try to explain the profession, and at times it could be kind of hard because we do so many
Yeah,
things.
absolutely. And the default is usually the community. And I don't fault anybody in the community for thinking this, but like their default is either A, the interaction that they've had with a social worker. And for a lot of people, that's child protective services. I get all the
Right.
time, "Oh, you're in child protective?" Nope, never been in that area my whole life. Don't have any expertise or knowledge in it. Or they have this view of social workers of like what a movie or a TV show has shown them. But
Right.
the truth is, social workers are everywhere. We're developing technology. We're in virtual reality. They're in HR. They're, in schools. They're in hospitals. They're in nonprofit organizations, but they're also in corporate America, right? They're like
Yes.
doing financial social work. We do so much. I love us.
Yeah, that I mean, I recently uh had I know I start recently gotten like emails about financial social work, and part of the pandemic, just been spending a lot of time learning about the stock market, and starting to invest, and prior to me moving, the whole idea was me getting a home and just learning like the home buying process and all that entails. So, financial social work is something that kind of does interest me, just to get more info about it. And I know there's a certification that goes into that as well. Um, so it's very interesting. And I know a corporate social work, there's a whole group that's like talk about what they do in the corporate world. So it's definitely do a lot of different things within the field in different areas, and different populations.
Absolutely. I just recently started contributing to Forbes. I'm a regular contributor there and on Newsweek as well. And it's been so fun to talk to my colleagues who also share spaces in that sort of media outlet, but are in sort of the financial world or the business world. And they're like, "Oh, we didn't know social workers are here." Or it was just like this revelation of,
Yeah.
what we bring to their organizations or what we can bring to a C-suite table. Um, lots of stuff we do. It's time we tell our story.
No, of course, and I know, like, now I mentioned like the very beginning of we have our small businesses as well. I
Yep.
have a small business, and we writing books, and like, I know
Yeah, you're
like,
a published author.
so we do all type of different things, and besides the typical roles of school social work, or child welfare. I mean, that's how I got started in child welfare, many moons ago, and this child welfare does bring those fundamentals, and you learn so many different things that carry you over for the rest of your career. So it's just a fascinating profession, and like, you do different things, even get into politics. I've had MSW people with MSW social workers who ran for public office, and so it's just a gamut of things we could do.
Absolutely. And you know what? In Delaware, we have candidates for social workers who are running for office, and who continue to hold office. We've got Senator Marie Pinkney. She's a social worker doing awesome things in the state of Delaware. We have social workers running anywhere from really the school board to the state house and even in federal government. Um, you know, there's a lot of great thought leadership coming from our profession across the board. We need more social workers to run for office. Honestly, I think we should be in the C-suite and in the State House and in the White House.
No, no, absolutely. I think that that time eventually is going to come. I like to hopefully be in my lifetime to really see that, and I think I saw even just before we started recording that Karen Bass, who's a social worker, she's running for mayor in Los Angeles. So you know, we out there.
We are, you know what, we are. And, you know, in particular, Delaware social workers really have a very unique opportunity. One, we're a strong, tight-knit community in Delaware, but two, Ashley Biden, the president's daughter, is a social worker,
Yes, she is. That's
right? Social worker from Delaware. So we've got a voice there. Lisa Blunt Rochester, who is one of our congresswomen from Delaware, she comes from a family of social workers. Her
oh,
father was a social worker. Her sister is Marla Blunt Carter, and she sits on the Delaware NASW board. Like, she comes from a social work background, and it's just such an awesome opportunity, particularly for Delaware social workers, to have visibility and the recognition, and also have a voice of, you know, what's happening in those critical spaces.
no, and of course, especially you know we're right right smack in the middle. You know, we got you know New Jersey. We're 3 hours from like New York City. You know, driving or taking Amtrak. You know, an hour, just over an hour from Philly. Depending where in Baltimore, I'm like up to like an hour to Baltimore. You got a couple of hours to DC. So you're right smack in the middle, and it's time for you know, social work especially in Delaware and definitely parts of New Jersey to really kind of like galvanize and kind of take charge and do what we need to do to really enhance the profession like our code of ethics tells us to.
Right? Can you imagine if there were just social workers at every policy decision-making table, like bringing the voice of the community in, understanding the implications of these policies that ultimately we're responsible for carrying them out anyhow. So bring us into the table. Let us tell you how it's, you know, that's really going to play out. Let
Yeah,
us give you that perspective and how it's going to impact people and elevate the voices of the people that we're working with.
shoot. I learned how to handle the budget of Social Security. I know in grad school. I'm like, so
Yeah.
so it's like for all these politicians be like, oh, we're gonna cut Social Security or threatening to cut Social Security or Social Security is gonna be cut by like 2034. And it's like, really?
Well, you know, the reason I didn't start out my journey as a social worker really to be in the policy side that much. Like, I went to undergraduate school. I lived in Kansas. I had a very limited world when I lived in Kansas. And my first job out of undergraduate, I went straight to work, and I worked at an HIV/AIDS organization. And at the time, I worked in Kansas City, and Kansas City is divided by both Missouri and Kansas. And
Mm,
I was the only social worker in Kansas City proper who had a caseload of Ryan White clients on both the Kansas and the Missouri side. And back in the day, and it probably still works in the same ridiculous way, but the federal government gave the Ryan White funding down to the states, and the states have had a lot of flexibility to sort of decide how those funds were going to be used, whether it be housing or rapid rehousing, and
right.
also had the ability to determine what the formularies were, like the medication formularies were in each one of these states. So Kansas had a very expanded formulary at the time, and Missouri did not. So I was seeing clients who had sort of like three medications available to to them through this program, who are living, you know, on block A, and on block C, because they lived on the Kansas side, they had all 52 medications at the time covered on their formulary. And there was
Mm,
one day that I was sitting in this like multidisciplinary, like very big care coordination meeting, and this data was being shared with the larger community, and showed that there was an increase in HIV/AIDS cases, or individuals living with HIV/AIDS on the Kansas City, Kansas side. And people are like, what's going on? We've got this big problem. We don't really, like, we've got to solve this.
Right.
And there was me, all of 22 years old, raising my hand in the back. And I was like, I actually know the answer to this question. It's not that you, and they were like, what's the answer? And I said, well, it's not because you have like an epidemic happening in Kansas City, Kansas. I said, what we know is if our clients in Missouri aren't able to get the medication they need to live, if they stop paying their rent, they go homeless. Kansas City, Kansas picks up and will rapidly rehouse them 2 blocks over. And then they have the access to the life-saving medication that they need. Like, this isn't an epidemic, it's a policy problem. And everybody
Right.
was blown away. I was like, God, y'all, we've been advising our clients how to navigate this system because the system is broken.
Right.
And it was sort of in that moment, I was like, you have absolutely no idea what's going on. I'm just going to go fix it. That's why I went to grad school for policy. I was like, I'm just going to go solve this problem. But I feel like social workers on the front lines always have these answers. We know, just nobody's asking.
Right. No, of course, or they're afraid to ask. For people who know who don't know what right and white funding is. Now, I mean, I know because I'm actually working in an HIV clinic currently, and I've worked with HIV clients in the past. But what is right and white funding?
Yeah, so Ryan White funding is federal funding that is issued through the Ryan White Care Act, and it's been a million years. So I have probably bungled that up a little bit because it's been a very long time since I've worked
Right.
in the field. But it's, funding that goes to the states to help combat the AIDS epidemic in our country. It supports individuals living with HIV/AIDS access to healthcare, access to medications, housing, employment services, really thinking about the wraparound care that they needed to make sure that they were living quality lives and that we were supporting them in any way that we could. Great funding stream, but just
Oh yes,
sort of
absolutely.
poorly executed, at least back in the day.
Yeah, and is definitely a great program, and is definitely a huge lifeline for those who are living in the state of Delaware who are undocumented, who do have HIV and they need their medications and are able to get it free of cost through the Ryan White program and get medical care that they need to live a long, healthy life as best as possible. So it's definitely
Absolutely.
a great program, and I would love for continued funding and even more funding because the government wastes money or just nonsense or giving other countries money that could be spent here. Then we have a national debt and we got a student loan crisis going on, and it's just
Ugh.
a lot of stuff going on. Um, but I wanted to switch gears though. How was pandemic been not only for you being executive director of both New Jersey and Delaware, but also for you as a person?
Oh, great question. I think it was, um, wow, what a ride this has been, right? That's
Yes.
my global statement on it. When the pandemic happened, I, um, I think like most people and absolutely every working parent that I know were thrust into the middle of, oh dear
Yeah.
God,
Yes.
WTF are we gonna do now? I didn't sign up to homeschool. I did not sign, like, I do not know first grade math. I don't want to learn first grade math. No interest. So it was really challenging. And I think I'm
Yes.
just starting to emerge from that place of like crisis 24/7. But there are some really beautiful things that I think came from the pandemic, both personally and professionally. One of the biggest affirmations of our work that we have been doing at NASW New Jersey and in Delaware has been our focus on innovation and forward thinking about where we were as a profession. When I came on board as our executive director, one of the first things that we did was move very quickly to implement new technology, getting everybody laptops, getting VoIP phones. We really invested a lot of money because I wanted us to be on the road. I wanted us to be flexible. I wanted us to be able to respond. And people sort of were like, oh, that's a little crazy. Why are you doing that? But when the pandemic happened, when we shut down, truly, there was absolutely no disruption to services for us as chapters. Our teams were already equipped. They already knew how to use these systems. And we were able to very quickly move to online, like Zoom everything. We were up and running in 2 or 3 days without a moment to spare. And I think that really affirmed for me and continues to reaffirm that while we have to be focused on what's happening today as a profession, we also have to be really mindful about what's happening around us, what advances are being made in technology and VR and like ketamine assisted therapy. Like we need to be thinking about all of those things that like we have not talked about as a profession, so that when it's thrust upon us or something weird happens again globally, I don't know.
Right.
But we've been thinking about it. I think the other thing, we had a moment in New Jersey. When people started first talking about a possible lockdown, and we weren't quite there yet. New Jersey was about 6 weeks out from our annual conference that was in person. And it's, 1,300 people. It's a massive conference. And we made the decision right then and there, before anything was shut down, before conferences were really being canceled, to move virtual. And it was a big risk. And a lot of people were like, I don't know, this is crazy. Things are going to be fine in 2 weeks. But we just had to make a decision based on the information we had available to us today and like own it and go forward. And I think a lot of times as social workers, like we just don't know what's going to happen, right? Like you don't know what's really going to happen. You got to
Not
make
at
your
all.
best decision with the information you have in front of you today and then own it and go for it. And our team did. And we did not lose registrations. In fact, it was one of our most successful conferences. We were one of the first in the country to go virtual with a social work conference. And our team killed it. And our participants loved it. And I think that's sort of a good thing in social work, a good lesson. Like you don't always have all the information. You do the best with what you got today. And, you shift and you pivot in ways that you never thought possible.
No, yeah, absolutely. And I love that you bring up VR in the conversation when regards to social work. I haven't seen or heard, and I do spend a lot of time, between Instagram and social work. Twitter is absolutely amazing.
Yeah.
I met so many great people on Twitter doing amazing work in the field, and you're the first person I think that's brought up VR. I've had thoughts regarding like VR and everything related to NFTs. I know NFTs was a
Yeah.
big thing a year ago, and I even thought to myself, because I even like working with the kids and like kind of like drawing pictures on like the whiteboard and stuff like that. I'm thinking, the code of ethics, the social work is always going off within me. I was like, is it like against the code of ethics? If my client draws a picture, I take it. I take the picture of his picture that he drew. Do I take credit? I get in trouble. Get in trouble under the code of ethics. Be like, no, it's my drawing.
Yeah.
Or I'll draw the picture, or I'll draw a picture, or doing a session with a kid when we're just drawing, and I'll mention the NFT. Oh, you drawing an NFT? Just having those conversations with the kids that um might not hear that language at home or
Sure.
anywhere, and just kind of like having the little bit of, like, financial literacy or whatever, just having those type of conversations is important to have. So
Yeah.
I'm definitely glad you brought up VR. That's definitely in the future. We're seeing like Meta with the with those $1,300 things over the eyes, and trying to come out with things, and it's definitely coming, and
It's here.
yeah, it's here already. So it's like, how do we in social work adapt to that?
Yeah. VR has probably been one of my favorite conversations that I've had over the last couple of years. And in my job, I get to do lots of really cool stuff, but I also get to take on projects that are a little bit crazy, and VR has definitely been my pet crazy project for a couple of years. The work in the VR space is here, and the truth is, we as a profession, I think the VR space is very much akin to how we as a profession addressed telehealth, and that is we hid and ducked our heads in the sand, and we are like, no, 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 we don't do this. We are a profession that believes in face to face, and we didn't talk about telehealth. We were so resistant
Right.
to it until the pandemic hit, right? And then we were like,
Yes.
oh shoot, we better figure this out. And like we had people doing Zoom and like things that were not HIPAA compliant. I mean, it
Right.
was a disaster for a hot minute there because we hit our head in the sand, and that didn't prevent it from evolving. It just excluded our voice and our code of ethics and the development of sustainable ethical technology. We just weren't at the table. So when I think about VR, I really think about it as sort of akin to that conversation. And my goal of the last couple of years has been to really infuse the social work voice into these spaces. And we're seeing some really cool stuff develop in VR and the social work world. So social workers are using VR in therapy, which is awesome. You know, the
Wow.
Oculus headsets have come down in prices. You can get, you know, reasonably priced ones, $150 to $300 now. So like they're becoming a little bit more accessible. But with the evolution of VR in therapy in particular, I mean, there's like a whole section of our code of ethics that we haven't even like thought about. Or like, what happens? First off, let's talk about is VR in the space in that world? Is it HIPAA compliant? Because I don't know.
Right.
We have never spoken about that. Is insurance going to cover therapy and reimburse for it in the VR space?
Mm.
Are you know what happens and what does this mean ethically when our clients show up as dogs one day and
Right.
you know cartoon characters another, and every day they're showing up and presenting as something different? Like, what do you do with that? I don't know.
Right.
Like
I,
there's so much for us to unpack.
no, absolutely.
So that's been a really cool thing. The other thing that I think is really interesting, and I'm super excited about this piece of it, mostly because I'm not a clinician, and I leave that space to my clinical colleagues. But how do we use social work? How do we use VR in social work in educating students? You know, as social workers, we go through practicums and we work with clients under supervision, but we can't possibly be exposed to so many different spaces and places that social workers operate. And so you might do a practicum placement working with children and families and
Right.
land yourself as a first job in a DV organization, right?
Right.
Can you bring in great quality VR to give people processing experiences in the classroom so that they have an experience that's different to what their placements might be, that they get exposed and they can process like their own personal issues before you're sitting in front of a client, right? Like
No,
that's
of
always
course.
terrible.
Yeah.
Like, how can you bridge this gap? And there's some cool people doing awesome things. We partner with a woman named Courtney Harding, and she's the CEO of a VR company, Friends with Holograms. And so we've been sort of playing around with her stuff over the last couple of years. And I think there's an awesome space to be had. I see social workers talking about this at CSWE in the next year. I see us talking about it at South by Southwest and really talking about how social workers can develop it for our own purposes, but then also how do we have a voice at the table as it's being developed, you know, more globally.
No, absolutely. And I love to know that we're having this conversation because, like you say, it is here. It's been here for a while, and no, it's just stuff I think about, and even for myself, like I even like thought about for a house, like kind of like dabbling into like maybe like creating my own stuff and like and my like and or making like NFTs, but like related to Latino, Latinx communities. That we're coming. There's we're slowly like integrating. Like there's more of us out in the field and kind of like have a better representation of just of us in the field doing social work and kind of like people who look like me, like speak like me, kind of like act like me, like, and be in the field and actually doing social work stuff, but through like the metaverse
Yeah.
no, in that space that hasn't been really hasn't been fully like untapped yet.
Yeah, it's so possible. We just launched actually 3 weeks ago. I'm losing track of time. But we actually just launched the first NASW office. NASW New Jersey launched the first office in the metaverse. So we built our own
Oh,
metaverse
nice.
office and we brought people in. We did a training. We showed people there. So we're going to be offering CEUs in the metaverse now, to
Wow.
people who are interested in participating in it. You don't have to have a set of Oculus goggles. We really wanted to develop it on a platform that was accessible. So you can do it on a computer or an iPad or anything, but you can also have a VR experience and put on a pair of Oculus if you have them. And really, the purpose of this is to invite social workers like yourself into the space. Come play around. Let's talk about what's possible. Let us show you how to do it so that you can tinker and make it better. And it's been so fun to invite people in and to create it and to realize, that social workers can totally do this. We can code and we can do it, and we should be leading in this space. But just to think about what's possible and how might we improve our profession by the evolution of this kind of technology.
No,
There's so many possibilities.
no, absolutely. Um, you mentioned CEUs. Let's go right into Friday, November 18th, the NASW Delaware Social Work Conference. Now, can anybody who needs CEUs register for the conference, or is strictly for people in Delaware?
Nope. Anybody who needs CEs across the country can register. We're really excited about this conference. It is going to be completely online, which kind of a bummer, but we just weren't quite ready to go back in person. But one of the great things about this conference is it's asynchronous. We've got some live stuff on the 18th, and then there's on-demand component as well. So you're not going to be glued to a screen for 3 or 4 days. Just one day with good conversation and then some on-demand stuff you'll have access to. And the best of all, it's $99. And I think particularly now, one of the things we were passionate about is making it really affordable. We know renewals are coming up. We know you got to pay for that. We know CEs across the country can be really expensive. So for $99, you get 16.5 CEUs and you can be a Delaware social worker anywhere across the country. All are welcome.
Oh, awesome. I definitely I got that mandated reporter circled. I think that's the last CEU I need to renew my Delaware license. So I'll be. I'm really looking forward to it. I think I participated bits and pieces of the virtual. It was either last year or the year before. The 2020 version. I don't remember which one, but it'll be my second time participating, um, virtually. So I'm looking forward to it. And the Millennial Babes podcast hosts are doing one of the presentations. So I'm looking forward to hearing and seeing their presentations. So I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah, we've got such a fun lineup this year. We've got Marla Blunt Carter and Javon and Shannon Fish, who are on our Delaware board of directors, talking about the future of social work in Delaware specifically. We're doing some stuff with Letitia Gatsby. She's a social worker and just kick ass entrepreneurial social worker. New Jersey and Delaware, she's expanding her private practice all over the country. We've got creative leadership in action. We've got mandatory reporting, which is a requirement. We've got some really cool stuff, and we've got an on-demand one by a professor, Richard Cooper, and he's got some really, really interesting stuff to share with us as well.
No, like I said, I'm looking forward to. And it's like from 8 to like 4:45. Like,
Yep.
correct? Okay.
Yep, 8 to 4:45. Don't worry, we got a couple of breaks built into the day, so it won't be too difficult. But it's going to be a good presentation. And then the CEUs on demand, you'll have a month to tackle those on demand. So for the Delaware social workers who are listening, it is renewal cycle, as you all know. You got to get those in by the end of the year. So you'll have the one day and on the 18th, and then you'll have a month to finish up the rest of them. So you'll be in good stride for the renewal period.
I was anxious for a while, even before like the conference, and before I even knew the conference was coming up, about like like I had all these CEUs from my previous job, and I was like, wait, I never checked to see what the requirements for the renewal. And it's like, what exactly do I need? And I was thinking I needed all these CEUs, and then I was going to spend like this. This was like the beginning of the summer, and like I had a lot going on. Publishing my poetry book and like writing the Latinx social work book. I was like looking for a new job and also planning my wedding all at the same time in the
You're just
spring, into the
a
summer.
little busy there, aren't you?
Yeah, and podcasting weekly and being a dad of two kids and a caregiver to a 75-year-old parent. So it's like a lot going on, and it's like I need to take time out and look at these CEUs. I'm thinking I need all these CEUs, and really we don't in Delaware don't need that much to renew. Just like get the ethics thing, get the mandated reporting, and a few others, and like be good to go. Just pay the fee.
Yeah, you know what? It's Delaware regulations in terms of like meeting cultural competencies and ethics is a little bit more lax than some of the other states. One of the things I will just encourage everyone to do as soon as they can, renewal period, it doesn't really matter when, but NASW Delaware members get their CEs for free. That's one of the best things that we get to offer our Delaware social work community. And that's not the case for all NASW chapters around the country. It's just not possible. But Delaware was able to make that change a couple of years ago. And so for our members of NASW Delaware, you get to take your CE programs that we offer for free. And, if you start in January, by the time renewal comes around again, you're going to be ready to go.
That was going to be one of my questions. What was the benefits of joining NASW? So
Look, so I think that's one of the benefits. I'm going to be real honest with you. And I think this is where I hope to see us shift as an association. I think those transactional things are great, right? Like everybody loves a free
of
CEU,
course.
and we're happy to do it. But I think, and I'm going to sound like I drank the Kool-Aid a little bit, but I believe it to my core. The power of us as an association is in our transformative work that we do together. Like us coming together as a social work community, we are driving change, whether it's change at the state house or change within our licensing board or fighting to get this stupid test eliminated and leading up and showing this country what Delaware social workers can do. Like the power is not in those CEOs. I want people to get them because I know that's a cost, but I want people to be part of the NASW because they see the connection and they see the advancement in their careers and they see the power of transforming together. And NASW is only as strong as our members, right?
Right.
Do you want a bunch of middle-aged, women who are going to be transitioning out of their career to make all of the decisions for where we're headed as a profession? NASW chapters write the code of ethics. So social workers in our community need to be at the table. You need to help us push that envelope. You need to help us change the direction of where our profession is going so that it is more diverse, that it is more equitable, that we are doing the things that we should be doing, and you've got to hold us accountable. And so you got to have a seat at the table. You got to be a member to do that. And that's my invitation to people. Come, challenge us. Let's think outside the box. Let's create some good trouble together. And your voice is not only wanted, but it's desperately needed.
Yeah, that sounds great. And I hope though definitely change is definitely needed, and just the country as a whole, within like the last 5 or 6 years, even before 45. I'm like Whoopi Goldberg. I don't like saying his name. I acknowledge he was the president. I acknowledge he was the president, and that will go in the history books forever. But even stuff like this that we've been talking about is even before he came over. We've been
Yeah.
having issues for a very very long time. And, I think people are more and more awake and really kind of like understanding like how like the game of life is like really really played, and at times there's certain issues that it doesn't matter who the president is, things are just going to be ass backwards just because the country, the way the country is. So it's like, and you mentioned like the other statesmen that have been in office for seem like 100 years, and it's like it's time for a change, and you kind of like see like give and take that's happening in Washington, and we kind of, I even saw that within like the schools, like that we try to teach having more compassion for the kids that have been through a lot during the pandemic, and having more social emotional learning. And we got like teachers who've been there 20, 30 years are like, I don't want to be bothered doing with that. Like the old school way still kind of
Yeah.
works. And it's like, no, but like we need like, we got the whole pandemic, kids are like 1 or 2 years behind grade level, not reading where they should be reading at, math skills. I dealt with kids that saw a piece of paper on the table, like just the basic assignment, like right after breakfast, and flipping chairs, flipping tables, and like, what is this? And not, we went from like pandemic where everything was on the iPad, and like, all right, you do the work, and you on the electronics, and now you come to school, and then you're expected to actually take a piece of paper and pencil the way it was prior to pandemic and try to do work. It was like the kids are like, what is this?
Right.
And don't know
It
how to really express themselves. And it's like like we mentioned in the beginning, the whole system is screwed up.
it is. And in NASW as an association, look, I love what we do and I love what we stand for. And I'm so privileged to be in two chapters who are doing awesome things and have great members. But we need more diversity in our association. We need more forward thinking people. We need people who are going to challenge us to grow and develop. And if we don't also move and grow and work to decolonize social work and have those conversations internally, it's, as an association, we're not going to do the profession the justice that it deserves.
No, absolutely. Uh, it's just a lot going on. Just society, in general, and just now, for yourself, I know self care, is like this huge buzzword, definitely within our profession. But I take the tagline, especially with my business, self care is not a hashtag, is a way of life. So how do you know practice self care for you?
That's, I think, one of the most important conversations that we can have as social workers. There's a new ethical mandate for us all to practice self care. And I would like us not to talk about it in terms of bubble baths, because I almost feel like that's blaming the victim. Like you wouldn't say to somebody who is in, a DV situation, like, oh, well, if you just took better care of yourself, right? Like,
Right.
so why are we saying to social workers who are exhausted and worn out and like, hey, go take a bubble bath, or like, what are you talking about? I view self care as a little bit differently. One, I think it's important that we advocate for the things that we need, like systemic change, lower caseloads, better pay, loan forgiveness. Like for me, that's self care, because I can take 52 million bubble baths, but if I still pay $1,000 a month to pay off my darn student loans,
Right.
that's not, Calgon's not going to take that away. I don't. That doesn't even make sense to me.
Right.
So fighting for those types of things is truly self care, because I feel like I'm making change for myself and the generations to come. I think the other piece of it is really, as a profession, like saying no, just saying no as a complete sentence. Do you want to do that?
Mm,
No, no,
right.
no, I'm unavailable. I'm not available for that. I think social workers, myself included, my team will tell you this, I'm notoriously bad at taking time off and like truly disconnecting, because we're like, what if somebody needs us, right? Like, what if there's a
Yeah.
client in crisis? What if there's a thing? But really creating systems and teams who've got your back so that you can disconnect. I say that as I'm packing my bags and tomorrow leaving for Disney with my family.
Oh,
So
beautiful.
I'm going to practice that in the next couple of days. But making that time for intentional disconnect and just holding yourself accountable to it is really important. We started doing some stuff called, we developed and just launched it a week ago, actually, called a self-care series. And so we're really trying to bring in, Reiki and meditation and those things that are we know to be really good. DBT for social workers, doing tapping exercises, things that you can do, like little bite-sized 3 5 minute things that we can work into our day as
Right.
well. That's important, but you know, we gotta fight for the bigger things, because I think that's those bigger systemic things, fighting for your raise, asking for your raise, demanding that you're treated fairly as an employee, demanding that your leadership acknowledge the work that you do, that you're compensated. Like, that's so much self-care. That's really important stuff.
No, of course, absolutely. And I'm looking forward to whenever this, you mentioned student loans, and looking forward to whatever is happening. And I'm a little confused now that the Republicans, supposedly have blocked what the government is trying to do. So it's like, is it happening? Is it going to happen? I heard like it's going to happen, but people got to wait till like July of next year for stuff to start coming off. And I heard some other stuff about possibly like the if you had the Pell Grants, like up to 10,000 to 20,000 is happening this month. So I'm a little confused which one is what, like what is happening and when it's happening. I just wanted to be off. So I go.
I know. There's been such an evolution in student loan forgiveness, and NASW's been fighting for that, very diligently. We've been at the national level really doing a lot of work. We have a couple webinars on it, so I can certainly share that with you, and you can share it with your listeners as well. Just about where we are, what's needed, what you need to do. One of the deadlines just passed at the end of October. I, fingers crossed, got all my paperwork in, because I would sure like those to go away. I've been out forever. Um, so, but I mean, one of the things I think that we have to talk about when we think about student loans, and I think a lot of social workers are going to relate to this. When I got out of graduate school, I'm a first generation college graduate. I didn't have money. My parents couldn't pay for me to go to college. Not only am I
Right.
the first generation, I'm the first person in my family to go to college. And then I decided to go to graduate school because that was necessary as a social worker. I went
Right.
to Columbia, worked my way through college, but I took on more student loan debt than anybody. I mean, I rival my husband, and he's an attorney. And when you get out of graduate school, I had a master's degree from an Ivy League university, and working in New York City, I made $40,000 a year.
Mm,
Like, at some point in our social work journey, we all either continued to work in organizations and associations that paid us so little that we had to take on second, third, fourth jobs,
right.
right? And really ran ourselves ragged, or we made the decision to go to jobs that were higher paying, but put us in organizations and entities that don't qualify for student loan forgiveness because of their 501c3 status.
Right.
And I'm not sure that, like, that's necessarily where we want to be on a policy level, right? Like, so you moved people out of helping the community in really great ways, or we had to live in poverty for 25 years.
Right.
Like, it's ridiculous. It's
I,
ridiculous.
I- yeah, it really is. I know for a while I had like advocated, like if you like I know how a little bit the how the government isn't don't I know the government, at least from myself, the government is not going to pay or try to pay everybody's. You went to college, you got student loans, like everybody who ever had a student loan is going to be paid. Like I don't think that's realistic either in terms of how like the government works per se. But for me, like if you worked as a nurse, a teacher, doctor, a lawyer, social worker, nurse, teacher, any in a helping profession, and you show proof that you work or to get into the field, like you got student loans, you need to work in those fields, and those loans will get forgiven. That way, there'll be more. Now we got a whole teacher shortage. Like we could have like you more teachers. We have like police, like and firefighters and nurses, like kind of like open up the umbrella and kind of and not having to deal with like ASWB and all these other licensing entities and like and kind of like open that up and have and we kind of would deal with the shortages that we have now and it kind of like a domino effect. All right, and kind of all right. We have all what we need, and your loans are being paid off. So, you have any thoughts about that? I hope I made some sense with that.
Yeah, no, look, I don't think that we're ever going to be in a place where we can eliminate and forgive all the student loan debt, but I do
Right.
think we can do better than we are doing today. And I know that to be true because this isn't a matter of the money, it's a matter of priorities. We sure as heck can find money for our elected officials, their businesses to get tax breaks
Of
and
course.
to have their business loans. What Marjorie Taylor Greene just reported that she had one of her federal loans forgiven for her company or PSLF, or she had some sort of like COVID related thing forgiven.
Right.
I mean, we are giving money and tax breaks to people who don't inherently need it. And I think this is not an issue of resources and an inability for us to do this as a nation. It's a matter of the people in power doing things and making decisions that serve them for the most part, or their constituents and the people that are lobbying them, right? It's not about you and I and the social workers. It's about these big businesses and companies. It's a matter of our priorities. And I'm going to say that I will be a broken record because I think if we cared more about the communities that we're supposed to care about, this wouldn't be an issue. And we need to hold education accountable too. I mean, there's a whole conversation to be had about education as a for-profit entity and what how much student loans are appropriate for people to take out with the promises of what type of salaries they're going to come out with.
Oh
I don't know.
yeah.
I find it unconscionable that social workers are taking out 6 figures worth of loans, myself included, to come out making $40,000 a year. Like, we
No.
didn't get into this to be rich, but we'd like to be able to make a living.
No. It was, yeah. At least a decent wage that we could afford. A bare minimum of an apartment, or if you want to own a home, like be a homeowner. Like myself, I'm a first time homeowner, and I would love to have my student loans that I could put more money into, like paying off my mortgage, or it's invest in the market, or investing in like the VR technology with you.
Yeah.
It's and I'm
Well, this
sure.
is why we see so many people leaving the profession. And I don't
Yeah.
want to create the narrative that social workers you can't make a good living, because
No,
social
you
workers
can.
can.
Yes.
You can. Um, and there are social workers making great wages. But I think there is a narrative around social workers, particularly if you think about like BSW social workers and social workers in case management and things like truly on the front lines. Like, those jobs are exhausting and they're often under resourced, both
Yes.
financially and staff. And we do see people leaving the field because of that. And that ultimately impacts the community, man.
No, of
Now
course.
we're back where we started, the mental health crisis.
Exactly, and it's not just the clients that we serve; it's just us, the staff too, and we gotta there's a lot of burnout, there's a lot of compassion fatigue out there, and it's just we still dealing with COVID, and there's monkeypox going around, and we're in flu season, cold cold season, so it's like the MSV for the kids, or whatever it's called, going on with the with the kiddos. So it's a lot.
It is. And our community, I'm so proud of our social work community who really never skipped a beat when COVID happened, and never ceases to amaze me at the way that we organize and respond and rally to whatever the situation, be it a global pandemic, be it, racial and social injustice, be it, gun violence in our schools. Our community shows up time and again and are relentless in their desire to make this world better. And I think it's time for the systems to show up with the same level of responsiveness and passion for us that we do for the community as a whole.
Uh, no, of course. Play play a quick game with you. So I have a lot of listeners and a lot of friends who listen to the podcast, and what like to get more. I've met a lot of original New Yorkers that live in Delaware now. So if people want to like make a move and come down here, what as a social worker, want to make a move, why should people come down to Delaware and be working social work here in Delaware?
Oh, the community. I feel like if you're a social worker in Delaware, like it's only like 2 degrees of separation. We are not like 7 degrees, Kevin Bacon style. It's 2 degrees. Everybody knows everybody. And that community is really lovely and united. And I think if you're moving from places like, Brooklyn, where I was, or the Bronx, or even like smaller, tighter knit communities, coming to Delaware is going to feel like a very natural fit because it's also got some of that same vibe. I think the culture in Delaware is great. It's so diverse and there's so many cool things happening. There's also great beaches, which is lovely. So, you might be working in downtown Wilmington and have that like super city vibe and all that comes along with it, but you also have great rural locations, for I think the cost of living is a little bit more affordable. There's great, we've got grid title protection, and but community is really what it's about. Our social work community is so tight knit. I feel like everybody was like, "Oh yeah, I know Ashley Biden. We've got their phone number." We're like, hey, yeah, I'll just call the congresswoman. Our elected officials are so accessible here too, right? Like
Yes,
you can just
I've met the lieutenant governor twice and the governor once already.
right. You call them in a way like when I come from New York City politics. That's where I started my career, and even New Jersey now, and I've worked in DC and a lot of other places. Delaware elected officials are so accessible. You call their offices and you can get a meeting with them immediately. Like they're so responsive, and I love that about us. And that's probably why we get a lot done in Delaware.
Uh, I like it. I'm still learning like the ins and outs and just the political aspect, just Delaware as a whole, and I know things work differently in Newcastle County where Wilmington is compared to where I work down in Georgetown and down there. So it's like very interesting just to see the different dynamics of, of just the state as a whole.
Yeah, well, it's a good place to land. That's for
Yes,
sure.
absolutely. I, you mentioned salaries. I definitely like to see. Like, I know the cost of living is definitely cheaper compared if you coming from Philly or New York or in certain areas of New Jersey. I definitely like to see the prices of salaries definitely be more comparable to that. It wouldn't be such a drastic change. You
Absolutely.
want to move into Delaware where literally communities are being built from scratch and like with new schools and new construction of homes and just a little bit of land to cut grass or when the snow comes play football in the snow things of that nature, just the old school like American dream that you could be living in a home and live comfortably and but you need to have a actual living wage that you're not being like living poorly while being a homeowner. So
Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. And we're going to continue to hopefully advance that and keep advocating for it because, we're in the middle of or at least on the brink of what everyone seems to think is going to be a pretty big recession. And we want to make sure that we're shoring up our social work community.
Yes, no, it's fun. I'm glad you brought up recession. From the little studying that I've done and people that I follow, like, they're saying that we've been in a recession for a while, and I remember, 2007, 2008, and working in New York, and a lot of had a couple. HIV programs were forced to close. A lot of preventive services for kids, getting out of foster care and getting those preventive services to prevent going back to care. A lot of preventive service agencies were forced to close. I know myself being like furloughed like every Friday for like a summer, like not getting paid, like being furloughed one day without pay, and it was like a lot going on related in the social work field, and I'm curious to see how recession impacts the world of social work, especially here between Delaware and New Jersey.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I think it's going to be a busy couple of years from us continuing to fight for funding and to correct the funding of organizations, because we know that a lot of the social work community is grant funded, right? We all work with state or federal grants, and a lot of our salaries come through that way. So I think we've got some work to do on the advocacy front to make sure that we're protecting those programs and that those funding sources. But I'm hopeful, because I think there's some really positive trends that we're seeing in insurance and insurance reimbursements. Insurance companies, catching up to speed with what our licensing regulations are and starting to cover LSWs and reimburse for some of those levels that, as long as they're practicing under LCSW. So I have a sense of optimism as well, because I think we might be headed, in the right direction. And I see conversations starting to come to fruition. And, we planted the seeds a couple years ago, and now hopefully those good things will start to pay off.
That's definitely comforting and good to know that those conversations are already taking place. How can people find you? Reach out to you.
Well, definitely not on Twitter, because I'm not there, which is probably better given the state of it this week, from what I understand. Super easy to find us. So you can go to NASWDE.org. Sorry, that was a mouthful. NASWDE.org. And learn more about NASW as an organization. If you're listening in New Jersey, you can go to NASWNJ.org. You can find us. Both of the websites, super easy to get in contact with me. Go to the About Us. You can see a link on my bio. It says contact me, schedule time. Links you directly to my calendar if you want to chat. You can also shoot me an email. I love to email and hear from people in the social work community. Like to talk about the challenges you're facing, talk to you about what we can do to be more responsive to the social work profession, ideas for programs, you name it. Anything you want to talk about, you just shoot me an email. Just not next week, because I will be on vacation practicing self-care. But it's super easy to get a hold of, and happy to answer questions. If you're listening from anywhere else in the country or anywhere else in the world and you're not sure who to contact at NASW or how to connect with the chapter in your state, I'm also happy to make that warm handoff to your state's executive director, so you can get connected in a meaningful way in your state.
Beautiful. Thank you for your time. I know you're very busy, and thank you for coming on the podcast.
No, thank you for all you do and for giving back to the community in this way. This is so entrepreneurial of you, and I love to see social workers innovating and creating space and creating conversation. More of it's needed. So I have a lot of respect and gratitude for the work that you're doing.
Thank you. I appreciate you. We'll talk soon.
Likewise.